Excellent. All right. So this is a picture of an anablepid, which is not one of the fish we'll be talking about today. We'll talk about these things later. These are the four-eyed fishes. But today, we're going to be talking about superorder Paracanthopterygia. Now, this Paracanthopterygia means spiny rayed fishes. So these are mostly marine. There's not a lot of freshwater fish in this group. And odd, and I say odd because these are fishes like the anglerfish. So very kind of odd fishes. Many have true spines. And so a lot of these previous fish we were talking about had these soft rays on the dorsal fins and things. We're going to start seeing fish now that have true spines, so hard spines in the dorsal fin, and also ctenoid scales. A lot of these other less derived fishes had cycloid scales. So today we're going to see the first appearance of ctenoid scales, which these are derived fish characteristics, so advanced fishes. Also, these pelvic fins, as we talked about, they started off here towards the posterior, and they're moving more and more anterior. So now we have what's called a thoracic or jugular, meaning by the throat. And so these pelvic fins are oftentimes very closely associated with those pectoral fins. And so again, more derived fish characteristic. So this is, as a group, what we're looking at. So about 1,200 species, 37 families, and we're going to talk about a few key families today. So the first family here is family Percopsidae, the trout perches. Generally speaking, if we look at, again, the order Percopsiformes, and again, these are Ormes or Idae, it's Percops. Really, we have these weak spines present in the dorsal fin. So for instance, the first or second spine, or the first or second spine in the dorsal fin may be weak. Sometimes they'll have one in the anal fin as well. They're not nearly as strong or spiky as, like, say, the dorsal spine of a bluegill, which is an advanced fish. These are sort of intermediate. So kind of what we call weak spines, and they've only got a handful, but we start seeing them. Many of these fishes have ctenoid scales. So again, those scales here, they're not cycloid. They're the ones with the little rough tennae, the little needle-like rough projections that you can feel. And so sometimes the sides of these kinds of fishes appear rough. There are 9 species in family Percopsiformes, all freshwater. So the family Percopsidae has a large unscaled head. So relatively large head, and there's no scales here. 1 to 2 spines, again, in the dorsal and anal fins. So the first 1 or 2 spines are hard and spiny. The rest of these are just soft rays. Ctenoid scales, cycloid scales in some. Also, the adipose fin is present here. Now, I'm going to tell you this. This is probably one of the last fish we're going to talk about that has an adipose fin. There's a handful of more advanced fishes that have it sort of as a throwback. But really, evolutionarily, this is the last group of fishes that will have this little adipose fin here. All the other ones from here on out, that will be absent unless it's a defining characteristic. 2 species in family Percopsidae, they broadcast eggs on gravel or rocky bottom. No parental care. They just sort of let fertilization occur outside of the body. Max length is about 8 inches. Really, this family is in the fresh waters of North America. So the trout perches are family Percopsidae. Now, the next family is one of my favorites, Aphrododeridae. Aphrododeridae, the pirate perch. Now, look at this thing here. This is a monotypic family. This is a single species, and it's called Aphrododerus cyanus. Say what? Cyanus. This thing has an anus on its chin. Right here. That is a defining characteristic. It has a chin anus. The anus actually starts off in juveniles where it's supposed to be, and then as they mature, it migrates anteriorly here to the throat. These things have tenoid scales. Dorsal and anal fins, again, have 3 to 4 spines. So the first 1, 2, or 3 are hard spines. The rest are soft rays. Same with the anal fin. Large head and mouth. These things are only a few inches long, but they have a very large mouth here, and you can sort of see very well developed. This is again, that very well developed feeding jaw, and they're carnivores. Even though they're only a few inches long, these things are carnivores. Eggs are laid in dense vegetation, and it's sort of unknown whether there's parental care here, but the next slide I'm gonna show you sort of explains why the anus is actually here. These things occur in lowland fresh waters of eastern US, so like backwaters of rivers and swamps and things like that. They can tolerate some pretty poor water quality, and also they live in aquatic vegetation in these kind of like swampy areas. The position of the anus and urogenital pore is related to spawning strategy because the females will stick their heads into underwater root masses or aquatic vegetation and then release the eggs in there and then pull their head out, and then the male will stick his head in there and do the same. And so the anus is here, but also the urogenital pore. So gametes are released here along with urine and feces. And so your textbook sort of has this story in there where we talk about pirate perch, and this is sort of an example here. If you got like some trees growing on the side, you've got a root mass maybe extending into the aquatic realm, and these pirate perch then will hang around these root masses, or in some cases submerged aquatic macrophytes, and they sort of live here. And they're nocturnally active. They hide and spawn in dense vegetation in these root mats. And so the female, for instance, will stick their head into a root mass here and release eggs then in there in this little area, and then come out, and then the male will come in and fertilize those eggs. Hence, the anterior position of the anus allows deposition then of the eggs and sperm into these protected areas that are otherwise inaccessible by other predators. They also can then hang out in here where their body is inside the root mass, and they only stick their head out. And they do this to avoid predation. And then what they can do is then just defecate out of that head-placed anus. And so they don't then soil their little habitat here that they've created, this little house that they live in among the root vegetation. So this allows them to defecate without altering water quality in the refuge, and also then minimizes exposure to predators. So this is one of those examples where something ridiculous like a jugular anus does confer some kind of specialized function. And in this case, it's multiple benefits. So it allows them to spawn and protect the eggs, and at the same time then hide and to avoid predation. So that is Aphrododeraceae is the family. Aphrododeraceae is the fish, and I believe you need to know that one for the lab. And I mean, the jugular anus I mean, that's a pretty key one. Another family, actually, Carapidae. Now, I'm going to tell you that having a jugular anus is not just unique to Aphrododeridae. These things have a jugular anus as well. However, the difference is this. Look at this. This thing has a very long, slender body with a jugular anus. We call it eel-like. Pelvic fins are right up here, very near the head, sometimes even under the chin. But they are eel-like with a jugular anus. So family Carapidae, the pearl fishes. The scales are completely absent on this fish, and they are translucent or very lightly pigmented. So you can sort of see this Carapidae pearl fish here is almost translucent. 32 species, they get to about 12 inches in length. No parental care, they just sort of release their gametes. External fertilization occurs outside of the body, and no parental care. These things have worldwide tropical and temperate sea distribution. So major characteristic here. Jugular anus, long, slender body, pelvic fins if are absent or they're very much towards the head. And so scales also are absent compared to family Aphrododeridae. Another major feature is this jugular anus, very similar to the pirate perch hiding in the weeds and sticking just its head out. Pearlfishes do something even worse. They hang out in the anus of sea cucumbers. So some pearlfishes are what we call inquilin. And so if I was a student studying for an exam Thursday, I might want to know what the word inquilin is. Inquilin means tenant. And so what these fish do is they live inside of the body of invertebrates like sea cucumbers. And so you can see this pearlfish sticking its head out of the anus of a sea cucumber. A few species are parasitic. Sometimes they'll actually go inside and feed on the inside, like internal organs or the respiratory tree or the gonads, things like that. But you can sort of see here's a pearlfish just sticking its head out. Sometimes they'll come out a little farther, but that jugular anus then allows them to just come out a little bit and then defecate outside of the sea cucumber. And so pearlfishes do this. And this is what this behavior here is called in being an inquilin, or a tenant inside of another living thing. Pearlfishes have a planktonic vexillifer larval stage. And it's called this because of this velixium. It's a long thread-like first dorsal way that goes all the way back to the end of the body. And during metamorphosis, this long dorsal ray is lost, and the body elongates, and this tenuous stage fish, which is free swimming, then finds a host in which it lives inside of. And so then these pearlfishes will reside inside of the anus of a cucumber, sea cucumber. So inquilins. So again, a very unique from the pirate perch, but family Carapidae and family Aphrododeridae have that thoracic anus, very unique life histories. So those are those two families there. Next family, Ophidiidae, the cusk eels. Now again, they have this eel-like body. The dorsal fin comes all the way around the caudal fin. It is really the dorsal fin, caudal fin, and anal fin are all sort of contiguous. Pelvic fin is reduced oftentimes to just two simple rays. So for instance, these two things right here are the pelvic fins, very much anterior and oftentimes reduced. They're not really even a fin. They're just 2 or 3 rays or hard spines. In many cases, they're completely absent. Cycloid scales are present. So these things don't have tenuous scales. They have cycloid scales. Most are nocturnal. So they only come out and they're active at night. They usually bury in the sand to avoid predation in the day. Very deep sea fishes. Record in the family is 5.2 miles deep in the Puerto Rico Trench. So very deep water fishes, the cusk eels are. Max length 6.5 feet. Now, families worldwide tropical and temperate sea distribution. Some live actually in freshwater caves in the Caribbean, and like the Mexican cave fish, are blind. They don't have eyes because they don't need them if they're in the dark. And likewise, when you're down in the deep ocean, there's not a whole lot of light down there. So oftentimes, these kinds of pelvic fins here that have been reduced are often used for sensory detection. There's taste receptors on those reduced pelvic fins. So this is family Ophidiidae, the cusk eels, the deep sea cusk eels. Family Gattidae is the next one, and this one here I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with. The codfish. So they have a very elongated body. You can sort of see this representative here, kind of an elongated body. Pelvic fins are here, again, very close to the head, what we call thoracic or jugular, and again, associated them with that pectoral fin. No true spines. So these things do not have spines in the dorsal fins or the anal fin. Long. The fins are actually very long. And in this case, 1, 2, 3. This family has 3 dorsal fins, which is kind of unique. You don't see that all that often. They have a physoclystis swim bladder, meaning that this fish, there's no esophageal connection to the swim bladder. It fills the swim bladder using oxygen from the blood. It cannot go to the surface to fill it. There's no connection there with the esophagus. Cycloid scales, so kind of a throwback a little bit there, but we're in this sort of transitory Paracanthopterygiae superorder. They have a chin barbell. Chin barbell right here, also called a mental barbel. Mental is on the chin. This is covered with taste receptors, and they taste with it. They also have taste receptors on their pelvic fins, and they can taste with their pelvic fins as well. So like you taste with your tongue, the codfish tastes with its pelvic fins and with its mental barbel. Many important commercial species here: cods, haddocks, pollocks, and also the whitings. They make up collectively over 1/4 of the world's marine fish catch, and primarily for human consumption. So for instance, Alaskan pollock is the most important commercial species landed in the US by weight. And so this is like fish sticks and stuff like that. 40 species in family Gattidae, broadcast spawners, no parental care. They just release their gametes, fertilization occurs in the water. Worldwide marine, oftentimes cold water. We're talking antitropical distribution here, except the burbot, which is holarctic in freshwater. The burbot can be in freshwater. These are mostly marine in cold water. So these are the cods, family Gattidae. Some examples of gattids, as we call them, or family Gattidae. The Atlantic cod, again, note 1, 2, 3 dorsal fins and 2 anal fins. Largest 6 feet, 200 pounds. Was one of the world's most important food fish before overfishing. So this was, when we talk about the New World, this was a very important fish. 3 similar fish species. Now the cod has this white stripe down the side. The haddock has a black stripe down the side. And then the pollock has sort of this mottled brownish gray pattern on the side. And so that's the difference between these fishes is that white stripe, black stripe, not really a stripe, more of a just kind of a blobs of pattern. Now, Alaskan pollock, most people have eaten this. The fillet of fish sandwich at McDonald's is Alaskan or walleye pollock. These imitation crab meat stuff is made out of pollock. Also fish sticks and other fish fillets oftentimes are pollock. Sometimes cod or haddock as well. But this is a classic example of fishing down food webs. So the cod is really the more desired of the fish. It gets to a larger body size and the meat's a little bit better quality. And then they overfished that and they said, well, what's the next closest thing? Let's look at the haddock. Let's overfish that thing too. It tastes pretty good. And all the haddock is gone. And what are we left with? Alaskan pollock, they're a little bit smaller. You know, it's better than nothing. Let's go ahead and eat these things next. And so this is one of those examples of fishing down food webs. And so a lot of these products that were originally, for instance, codfish, then became haddock. And now in the year 2020, they're mostly pollock. So that's sort of the family here. So here's a video of codfish in the fishery of cod. And then I'm going to follow it up with a cod aquaculture video that talks about culinary preparation of the cod. So how to cook it and things like that. So here is the cod fishery.
Headed to oblivion. There isn't enough cod for people to make a decent living. What are we going to do about it?
Mark Alexander.
Yes.
Terry Alexander.
Yes.
On Wednesday, fishery management officials meeting in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, voted to drastically reduce the cod catch in the North Atlantic.
There's no biological wiggle room left.
The centuries-old fishery has been severely depleted in recent decades, and despite years of smaller cuts to the fish quotas, government officials say more painful measures are the only way of saving this fishery from extinction.
Fishermen, families, communities, I do not deny the costs. They are real. They will hurt.
The government only allows you to take so much out of the ocean, so whatever they come up with for a number is what it is. If you exceed that amount of cod that they give you quota for, you're shut down. As of 2 years ago, we were told that cod was going to be completely rebuilt in a year, and then all of a sudden, now they're telling us we're at a total collapse. If we're cut by 80% like they're talking, there's no way a lot of guys will make it. I mean, you can't even go target other things. Guys right now, there's a lot of them just hanging on, and those guys won't be able to continue to hang on unless they have other things to do. It's definitely going to be tough. I mean, hopefully we can hold on. I mean, I've got really big boat payments, so we don't have much choice. We have to keep going. I mean, I can't go get a land job and make my boat payments. There's no way. I mean, last year we've had the best year we've ever had for the amount of cod we caught. I mean, we did really well on the cod, and this year has been slower. All right, I'm gonna give you a shout back. I gotta pay attention here. Like this year, our water temperature was super high. I mean, I think they said it overall in the Gulf of Maine and on the East Coast was 2 degrees higher than highest it's ever been, and that has a lot of bearing on what fish do too. They're trying to do the right thing, and you can't fault them for that, but you got to look at all the uncertainties that are in there. It's just not an exact science is the problem. All of us want fish to be here for the future. I mean, there's not a fisherman out here that really doesn't care at all. I mean, we need to do this to make a living. I mean, everybody has bills to pay. Crews have bills to pay. I mean, it just trickles down, even the fish buyers and so on. I mean, it's just a lot of money at stake. I mean, we're going to try to buy whatever quota, because there's going to be a lot of guys not going fishing because they won't have enough to go. So we're going to try to buy what we can for quota. We don't have any choice, really. I don't have a college education to go fall back on, so we're going to go fishing and do what we have to do.
And so that is the cod fishery. So here is then one talking about culinary and aquaculture.
Well, I'm making one of my favourite dishes, baked cod. But with cod stocks at an all-time low, we've just got to find an alternative.
I'm travelling to the Shetlands, to the world's first organic cod farm.
Well, I really care about what I eat, and I'm not really prepared to eat farmed fish. Call me bonkers, but I think if a fish has had a decent life, you can taste it. And I know that if I catch a mackerel on a line, it tastes fucking great. It tastes brilliant.
And it's not just about the taste. I can't help being a little bit sceptical about any type of fish farm.
I do feel like signing off Noel Edmonds' Mr. Blobby. Time to make 50,000 cod.
I know the fish farmed here are fed a sustainable organic diet, but what I really want to know is whether they are kept in good conditions.
So what's the size of this pen?
The volume inside is the size of 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Maximum they would have in here would be 50,000 fish. Fish tend to shoal together. They like being close together.
The fish are graded in size to stop them eating each other, and the nets are doubled up to stop escapes. So far, so good. But what about the taste?
How would you normally cook your cod?
If it's really, really fresh, I would grill it.
Grill it.
Yeah, just that I'm trying in my feeble way to eat less butter. And you obviously don't care.
No,
Oh, it tastes good. The downside is that this farmed cod costs a third more than the wild stuff, and I'm not sure that people will pay the extra. So I'm taking it back down to London to put it to the test down at my local chippy. I've got you a present.
What's that?
It's special cod.
Yeah, let's
Just chuck it all in.
Too messy.
Oh, don't start criticising me before I bloody started.
I don't touch you.
Listen, I'm not going to do you for sexual harassment while I've got a plate of cod in my hands. It's all right, I've done one bit. All right, shall I put it in?
Yeah, put it in. Be careful. Go close to the pen. Close. Let him go.
If you bought the regular kind of cod in here, it'd be $3.90. But this farmed cod is $5.20. Would you pay that bigger difference? Possibly.
$5.20 for a size like that seems a little expensive, to be fair.
Seems slightly drier maybe than normal cod.
Well, I cooked it.
Oh, well, that's it, yeah.
It's nice and fresh.
Yeah.
Tastes like cod. The batter's just right. Yeah, I'll give it the thumbs up, definitely.
Next time I go to a supermarket, I will be buying farmed cod, because if we don't make that choice, there will be no more cod left in the sea. But perhaps the answer is for the great British public to stop being so bloody boring and eat different kinds of fish anyway.
So that is the codfish. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Some local examples. So again, this is family Gattidae still. Local, we call Gadoids of family Gattidae. Here's our pointer. Europhycus floridana, the southern hake. And again, these things don't, you know, they've got this elongated dorsal fin, but really look at this. They got that mental barbell. And so it's still characteristic there. Shallow water specimens feeding on crustaceans, a series of dark spots present on the head right here. Dusky patch on the operculum. Sometimes these alternating white and black lines or spots down the lateral line. And then Europhycus earlii, the Carolina hake, again, chin barbell down here. Pelvic fins are long and filamentous, again, for tasting the bottom. So again, this is the taste receptors on these things. And then sometimes white spots here. And so that's one of the characteristics there. The family Gattidae has these taste receptors then on the pelvic fins. And also that mental chin barbell right there. So next family. Batrachoididae. Batrachoididae, the toadfishes. Now, these things, when I said odd, this is what we're talking about. We're starting to get into these odd-looking fishes. Large head with dorsal eyes. The eyes are on the top of the head. Very large mouth. A long, kind of tapering body. Body is usually scaleless. These things don't have any scales. It's just skin. And again, the pelvic fins are usually in the jugular position, right under the throat. 1 to 2 dorsal spines. They often have opercular spine as well. Along the operculum, it's spiny. Some have barbells on the chin, like this one down here. Other times, it's just sort of like these kind of three-dimensional effects going on. These things are usually pretty well camouflaged. So a lot of times these features here are to help them blend into their surroundings or to make them appear invisible because they're kind of an ambush predator. 69 species in family Batrachoididae. They are benthic ambush predators. They sort of sit on the bottom and blend in with the bottom and wait for a fish to swim by, and then they eat it. So very well camouflaged. Worldwide marine tropical temperate sea distribution, there are a few there are a few species confined to freshwater, but mostly these are marine. And so family Batrachoididae, some local examples here, some subfamilies of toadfishes. Here's the venomous toadfish, or also called the reticulated toadfish. They have this hollow dorsal spine here on the dorsal fin, and also these opercular spines that connect to venom glands, and they produce very painful wounds. They're not going to kill you, but if you step on one, for instance, on the bottom, it can poke your foot, and it's very painful. And so you can sort of see these things sit on the bottom, and they're sort of lie-in-wait predators. Here's the Opsanus tau, the oyster toadfish. Again, these kind of features here on the chin. You call them barbels. They're really more of it helps with the camouflage. Here's the midshipman, usually has 2 rows of photophores along the belly. So these things can actually glow in the dark. They're phosphorescent. Non-venomous. Males in some of these species are highly vocal, and they can actually vibrate their air bladder, so the swim bladder inside their body for buoyancy. They can vibrate this and make a humming, a grunting, or a whistling sound. And this is used by males to attract females for mating. So they can actually vibrate their swim bladder to make underwater noises. So these are the toadfishes, a very odd looking, very distinct group there, that family there. Now we're going to talk about order Lophiiformes. And I'm just going to give you some, an order here we're going to talk about a couple families here that all share these similar characteristics. These are the anglerfishes for short. There's more than one family. That's why I'm telling you the order here. All the anglerfishes have the following characteristics. There's about 16 families total, about 300 different species. And 11 families are deep sea bathypelagic. So very, very deep sea open water. These are some of the various forms. So very high diversity here. And again, when we say odd fishes, that's what we're talking about. All of them have like these kind of fantastic appendages on their heads, which we call an elysium is the stalk. And then the tip of it is called an esca. Now, if I was a student studying for a test, I might want to know what these are. And sometimes these are kind of long, like this one here. Look how long this one is. This elysium is exceptionally long. Sometimes the esca is kind of bushy like this, or like feathery. Sometimes it's just a little nub at the end, right? Sometimes they're kind of crazy looking like this one. And other times there's also crazy barbels growing out of the chin. Now, this first ray of the dorsal fin is transformed into this structure. It's kind of a fishing pole. What these things do is they sort of jerk these things around, and then other fish are attracted to it, swim up, and then these things eat them. So it's sort of to lure prey in. And you can sort of tell with the teeth on this thing. Again, when we talk about advanced jaws that are good at feeding, these things are pretty good. Very long, sharp teeth. Pelvic fins are jugular, and so a lot of times, see here, the pelvic fins are jugular right here, associated then with the pectoral fin. Gill openings are often small, and so sometimes placed far back. Here's the operculum on that one. So oftentimes, in some cases, a regular size operculum, but oftentimes a smaller gill opening. And because these things are living in the deep sea, we're talking hundreds or thousands of feet deep, they have a physoclysis swim bladder. The swim bladder is inside of their body. It's not attached to the esophagus because these things are not going to swim 2,000 feet to the surface just to fill a swim bladder. They will use the gas gland to pull oxygen out of the blood to inflate it. So they have a physoclystis swim bladder. Lots of variation here. And the one family we'll talk about here, and again, don't get caught up when I introduce an order. Lophiiformes, oh look, family Lophiidae. It's pretty much the same word. The goosefish. And so anyone eating a goosefish, this is what they look like. They're basically just a bag, a floating bag with a giant mouth and teeth, and they just literally fill this bag with fish that they consume. And if you go to a restaurant, you know, you can order monkfish. This is monkfish soup. It's actually very good food to eat. It's a good food fish. Monkfish is a delicacy in Europe. And when you go to eat anglerfish or goosefish, they oftentimes call it monkfish is what they'll sell it to you in the fish market. Huge, wide, flattened head, fringe flaps around the lower head and part of the body, well-developed recurved canine teeth. And again, it's when these things bite onto a prey, they inhale it, and then that fish can't come out because these teeth are all pointed in like spears. They can feed on fish, and also in the shallows, diving birds that might come down to sort of pick off a fish. These things actually can eat birds if they're diving into the water. So not just piscivores, they eat birds. 25 species. They release their eggs, but they are adhesive, and they form these floating mats. So the males and females release their gametes, and the eggs then all attach together to form these kind of floating mats. Max size, 4 feet, about 88 pounds. And again, excellent food fish. Anyone who's ever eaten monkfish, it's very good. Marine, all seas except the Antarctic. And oftentimes these are, these are benthic. They sit on the bottom and wait for something to go by, and then they bite it. So they're on the benthic shelf and also on the continental slope. So here's a video of a fisherman. I believe he was an oyster fisherman or some kind of shellfish, who was actually going to get shellfish and ended up encountering a monkfish that bit onto his hand. So listen to this.
Зачем ты сейчас рожать? Не-не-не.
Костюм испортил.
Доска есть где-то.
Вон палку взять с этим, с гвоздем, по башке дать, но руку не пробить руку.
Не, по башке не надо его бить, надо просто ему в рот ставить. А вот доска. Дай еще палку руку, Макс.
Блять.
Может, ему мозги отрезать?
Раз уж пошла такая пьянка.
Ну, терпи. Аккуратно, костюм.
Снизу. Блять, держится. Блять.
Ай, блядь! Ай, сука! Надо вторая пасть! Блядь! Андрюха, подожди, все, не трогай, не. Подожди. Ай, блядь. Тихо.
Может, давай по башке долбани ему?
Не надо, подожди, он меня схватил второй пастью. Тихо. Блядь, как больно, сука. Блядь, твою мать.
Давай убьем нахуй.
Да убить надо по башке, дать ему гвоздем.
Ну?
Сейчас, подожди.
Блять, ну чем его расковырять? Ёбаный ты в рот, а? Вот с ножом пасть разрезать.
Попробуй, да, давай. С этой стороны, со стороны стола, или с той, своей, или с твоей, Андрюха. Бля, хуй ты, еще хуже у меня хватает, Андрюха. Видишь, у меня вторая пасть.
Да хуй ты мне что видишь? Блять, черт.
Видишь, у него вторая пасть там. Ай, блядь! Держи.
Ох, сука.
Не это самое.
Пиздец.
Гад.
Твою мать.
Фу, блядь.
Блять.
Повезёнчик, ты чё пугаешь народ? Залез, блин. Хрен знает фигурой. Видишь, у него вторая пасть, Андрюха.
Ага.
То есть вот это вот, видишь, вот это вот.
У Марины такая же херня.
Видишь, вот она. Маленькие зубы, смотри, вот они.
Ну понятно.
Видишь, вот.
А те
А
всасывают.
там, и он заглатывает. Ну, вот видишь, он мне руку, бля, пробил.
Ну. Какая хуйня. Вот у Марины такой же устрой, как называется.
Костюм надо будет мне, кстати, проверить. Видишь, и здесь пробил мне.
Естественно.
И здесь попробивал мне все. Я хотел засечку, раз он меня цепанул.
А что ты по локоть суешь туда?
Я, честно говоря, не думал, что он хватанет.
Да никто не думал вообще. Ну, блин, черт.
Да я не черт.
Доставайте теперь его, блин.
Все, YouTube сейчас будет №1. По висючему кругу засунул вообще.
Иди, чувак, я с тобой сфотографируюсь. Крестничек ты мой.
Да, подожди, я видео вырублю тогда.
So you'd see the size of the mouth on the monkfish there, and also those recurved teeth. You know, they're designed to be angled in to the mouth. And so when that fisherman had his hand in the fish's mouth, once the jaws clamp down, it's not like you can pull it back out. These teeth are all pointed the opposite direction. So they had to pry the jaws of that thing open so the guy could release his hand. But you can sort of see a very large mouth. So no joke. So that is Lophiidae, family Lophiidae. Another group of odd fish, family Antennariidae. So I always remember this antenna. These things have these very large projections here on the head, these antennae. So Antennariidae. Arms are, the pectoral fins are arm-like. So they have their pectoral fins here and they literally crawl. They crawl around on the bottom of the ocean. And so the mouth is here, the eyes are here, and these are literally, the fins are legs, right? Here's another one. These are the fins here, they're like legs. Sometimes it's hard to even tell where the eyes and mouth are. They're very well camouflaged, very cryptic. The sargassum fish doesn't live on the bottom. It actually crawls over floating weeds called sargassum, and it's in the Sargasso Sea, hence the name Sargasso Sea, where the eels are spawning. So the sargassum fish is hanging out in the floating weeds in the Sargasso Sea. The body is covered in loose skin, so these things don't really have scales. They're just sort of like this weird loose skin. Like the other group, they spawn pelagic floating rafts of eggs. So their eggs are released external, fertilization occurs outside, and then they are adhesive and they stick together to form these mats. Some species will actually carry these mats around and protect them. So there's a little bit of parental care every now and then. Max length 14 inches. Family marine, worldwide tropic, and some temperate sea distributions. Most species are within 20 degrees centigrade isopleth. So if you look at these things, they're very well camouflaged because they're predators. So you can sort of see, again, just like the goosefish and Lophiidae, very large mouth, and this is a fish it's consuming. They can eat relatively large prey items despite their size. Family Antennariidae, very well camouflaged, again, sort of lurking around. Sometimes they look like algae or plants. Sometimes they look like corals. You know, these things are just hanging out, standing next to some coral, and another fish swims by and they eat it. So family Antennariidae. Here is the sargassum fish. And so the dorsal rays are also modified into this Elysium and Esca, just like you see in the Lophiidae, the anglerfishes. And so this is sort of a characteristic there. And this is a sargassum fish. So again, very well camouflaged. And this is actually what sargassum looks like. It's these kind of floating seaweed mats. And these fish just sort of hang around and crawl around inside of these floating mats. And you can see they're very well camouflaged for that environment. So when you look at these guys here, they also have that Elysium and Esca here. Here's one down here. So again, characteristic, very odd looking fish. Here are some close-ups of the different frogfish Esca. And so like, for instance, here is our Elysium is the stalk, and then here is our Esca is this kind of feathery thing on the end of it. Sometimes they look kind of like this, the very thin Elysium, like in this case here, very thin thread-like Elysium. There's her Esca, and they sort of jerk this around. They sort of swing it around like this, and then other fish come up to check it out, and then when they're looking at it, these things inhale and eat it. And so sometimes they'll actually do this. They'll go down into like some kind of burrow, and they'll stick that Esca down in there, and then whatever lives in that burrow comes up to check that out, and then the frogfish eats it. So they shouldn't lure prey out of burrows as well. But lots of different lure types, lots of variation here. And also lots of brilliant colors, you know, like you're looking at pinks and yellows. And so very brilliant coloration here amongst this family of fishes. So deep sea anglerfish is also in this group. And I'm going to show a video here of the anglerfish feeding, and then also frogfish walking around. But again, the anglerfish is also this very kind of wide variation in body types. Again, Elysium with an Esca on it. Some are big, some are small, some are very long. But again, the idea is let's swing this thing out. Anything that's in front of our mouth comes to check it out, and we eat it. Look at the nice set of teeth there on these jaws. Sometimes these Esca are bioluminescent. They glow in the dark, especially for the really deep sea anglerfishes. And so the Elysium, the Esca can glow. So we'll talk about this later, but in some species of anglerfishes, it's so remote in the bottom of the ocean that males, when they find a female, will bite onto her. They will bite her body, and they will literally permanently fuse with her. So their flesh becomes one, so they can never let go. And that's because sometimes it's so hard to find a mate in the bottom of the ocean. That's sort of the only strategy you got. And so really then what happens is the female, it's not really that she's a hermaphrodite, because the male fish is still alive, just hanging off. So this is an example of that. Here's the female anglerfish, and there's a male parrot, what they call it. It's kind of like basically the male's parasitizing the female because they bite on and permanently fuse there. So whenever the female then goes to breed, all she's got to do is release her eggs, and then the male is there to release sperm. So the males sort of hitch a permanent ride. And that's sort of a unique reproductive strategy here amongst the deep sea anglerfishes. And so I'll show you then a video of deep sea anglerfish as part of the world's weirdest on National Geographic.
It lives in total darkness at depths of up to a mile below sea level, and what has been referred to as the midnight zone. Down here, don't be afraid of the dark. Be afraid of the light. The light is a lure wielded by our champion of the weird, the deep sea anglerfish. The lure is created by bioluminescent bacteria that live inside the angler. It drifts through the water, flashing its beacon, waiting for something to take the bait. This squid thinks it's found an easy meal. A fatal mistake. The squid was smaller than the angler, but had it been bigger, the anglerfish is prepared. This far down, meals are few and far between, so to make the most of every opportunity, This anglerfish has evolved a distending jaw and expandable stomach. Want more weird? We have it. This is a black devil angler. A female, to be precise. She is after this fish. It's not a meal, it's her mate. This is the male black devil angler. A specialized scent organ locks in on the ladies. If it's difficult to find food this deep, it's even more difficult to find a girlfriend. Deep-sea anglerfish solve the problem by having extremely clingy relationships and never letting go. Ever. The male bites into her belly. His body releases an enzyme. That dissolves the skin under the bite and fuses his mouth to her body. Then, the two become one. He will draw sustenance from her for the rest of his life. In return, the female has a ready supply of sperm for whenever she's ready to mate. Thank you, deep-sea anglerfish, for bringing so much weirdness into our lives.
So the deep-sea anglers. And then here is a frogfish. So when we talk about these modified fins that they use to walk, that's literally what they do. You'll see this fish will be walking on the bottom. And again, you can see how big the mouth is. It's got a very large mouth for it, the size of the bottom. So that is a frogfish walking. So very interesting group of fish. And so really the two made is Antenneriidae and then Lophiidae. But I think the next one here, Ogcocephalidae, the bat fishes. So this is one of the title slides for the previous lectures. This is the red-lipped batfish. Ogcocephalidae, the bat fishes. Again, cephalus is head, ogco, these things have very odd-shaped heads. Flattened head and body. Head is actually up to 50% of the body length. So if we look at the head from being from here to there, half the length of this fish is its head. Ogcocephalidae. Scales are modified into these like kind of hard, bony tubercles, kind of rough. Arm-like pectoral and pelvic fins. And just like the other fishes we just showed, the frogfishes, these things can crawl. These are like legs. They can crawl around on the bottom. These things actually are capable of jet propulsion, though. What they can do is they have this opercular siphon here behind these fins. They can actually pull water into their buccal cavity and squirt it out over their gills through these opercular openings, and they can use it as like a jet propulsion. They can spray a jet of water and shoot forward. They do have a short retractable elysium under the rostrum. So they do have a short thing up here. All right, there's a good example of one right there. And so they do have this elysium underneath there that they can use to attract things to eat. It's not nearly as prominent as, say, the other two previous families. Also, females produce these egg grafts. So again, external fertilization, sperm and gametes, sperm and eggs are released outside of the body. And then the eggs are adhesive. They form these floating rafts. So that's sort of a trend here among these few families of fish. A family, worldwide warm, tropical, subtropical areas, oftentimes in shallow reefs, but they could be deep, you know, up to 6,000 feet deep, which is no joke. That's pretty deep. And so, again, this is another odd group of fishes here. And I would say that these ones here using the water jets is a key feature there. So here's a video of a batfish crawling, and then I'm going to show a short video clip then of the red-lipped batfish. But again, very odd. Ogcocephalidae. Ogcocephalidae, the batfishes. So here is a batfish, and note these fins that are modified into legs. These things actually will walk around almost like flippers. So you can see also very good camouflage. You know, you see those things on the bottom next to the substrate. You know, you can sort of see that they blend in very well to the substrate, like here. So here then is the red-lipped batfish.
But not everything interesting here is a shark.
Well, this little guy wasn't on my agenda, but it's certainly one of the strangest I've ever seen. Everything about this fish is just, well, weird. It's a red-lipped batfish. Instead of really swimming, it walks on fins modified to work like feet. It also has a strange horn on its head, which conceals an odd lure. How it uses this lure is not really known. This is the weird-looking fish I was hoping to find. It's a frogfish pretending to be a harmless orange sponge. Like the batfish, it uses its fins more like feet. To move in for close-ups, I bring a heavy tripod to keep the camera steady. The frogfish is waiting patiently to deploy its second trick of deception. It attracts prey with a tiny lure it uses like a fishing pole attached to the top of its head. Everything about this fish is just, well, weird.
And so if we go back here, I'll show you these water jets. You saw those open right there. These are the opercular exits, the excurrent siphons. So when they gulp water in, they can actually blast water out of these two pores like a jet engine. So that's what we're talking about there. Very odd. So again, Paracanthopsis rigii as a group, we're talking about odd stuff. The codfish are in there, so it's not that crazy. Okay, so here we go. we're moving on now out of this Paracanthopterygiae. Now we're going to talk one more example before exam 1. I'm going to give you one example of superorder Acanthopterygiae down here. 13,000 species, 251 families, 23, about a quarter of these are freshwater, 3/4 are marine water. This is a large, diverse group down here, Acanthopterygiae. 2 primary innovations, and again, keeping with the theme in the course. If you want to make a fish, if you want to drive evolution and diversity, what do? Well, we can modify our form so we're fast and we're less heavily armored, but also really this jaw invention. And so let's add a little bit more sophistication to the jaw. Let's add some more features to it. So the upper jaw, again, this maxilla and premaxilla have maximum mobility and protrusibility. These things have the maximum ability to create negative vacuum pressure to pull stuff into the mouth and trap it. And the second is then the pharyngeal apparatus has developed the highest level of achievement or sophistication. So again, I talked about these oral jaws, and we showed videos of the moray eels that had this pharyngeal jaw. It's the first time we really started seeing sophisticated pharyngeal jaw stuff. We saw it also in the family Cyprinidae, like the minnows and the suckers, catastomids that eat shellfish and things like that. This pharyngeal jaw inside the skull or head that pulverizes stuff. We see now the highest level advancement here for getting stuff into the fish, and also then the highest level of sophistication here for pulverizing that and getting it ready to go into the stomach. So obtaining it, pulverizing it, right? And so this then makes available then lots of different diet stuff, you know, like shellfish, for instance, have a hard shell. You think it protects them? Well, depending on the species of fish, the pharyngeal jaws can actually crack coral. So stone, essentially. So these things are very powerful. So 2 primary innovations, both regarding the jaws. The oral jaws and the pharyngeal jaws have now developed advanced feeding strategies. So here's our one example, family Mugillidae, the mullet. You know, we call these jumping mullet because they jump. And so I'll show a video of that. But here's a mullet. Widely separated, spiny. So here's where we start seeing a lot of the spiny activity here. Anterior dorsal, close to the head, spiny fin. Posterior dorsal, close to the tail, soft rays. Okay, key feature for more advanced fish. Pelvic fins are sub-abdominal right here. So again, these pelvic fins are going to be moving. You're going to see pelvic fins associated with pectoral fins a lot from here on out. Lateral line is absent or very faint in these fish. They oftentimes don't have one. Ctenoid scales in most. Every now and then you'll see a throwback to cycloid scales, but really from here on out, we're going to be looking mostly at fish with ctenoid scales. Medium-sized mouth. You can see this mouth here, this terminal, grubbing around on the bottom in the detritus. You know, mullet are kind of omnivorous. They sort of are opportunistic. They eat whatever. Muscular-like stomach, extremely long intestines, 7 times the length of the fish. So what these things can also do is they can process detritus on the bottom. And so they can actually eat muck off the bottom as well as other stuff. And so they do have a gizzard-like stomach and a very long intestine for absorbing nutrients out of detritus. Frequently jumping out of the water, hence the nickname of these is jumping mullets in family Mugillidae. And this one's an easy one for me. Mullet, Mugillidae, however you want to do that. 66 species, broadcast spawning. They release their eggs in the wild, no parental care. They just sort of let fertilization happen. Max length about 3 feet. Now, these are very important food fish. They're cultured oftentimes in the tropics around the equator. And also, if anyone's ever eaten a mullet, they're not bad tasting. I mean, and a lot of people call these things trash fish or something. They actually taste pretty good. I've eaten them off the coast of North Carolina. You know, if you smoke mullet, for instance, it's very good. Blackened mullet, for instance, also pretty good. So mullet's not a bad eating fish. Coastal marine estuaries, you know, they can come into the estuaries, like, for instance, the Pamlico Sound. Also fresh waters of tropical and temperate seas. So they've got kind of a freshwater by marine distribution and also coastally in the estuary. So quite wide distribution of family Mogillidae. The mullets. So these are a picture of these things. A lot of times they school and you'll see them jumping out of the surface of the water like this. Now, the reason why they jump is not really well understood, but my guess is a lot of this has to do with predator avoidance. So when we talk about family Exocidae, the flying fish is oftentimes, that is exclusively predator avoidance. And so maybe it's these mullets are jumping out of the water to escape predators. So if you're ever at the beach and you see a bunch of mullet jumping, maybe there's a shark, I don't know. So here's a video showing the mullet jumping with some good aerial footage showing some pretty dark shadows chasing them. So here are the jumping mullet, family Mugillidae.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you liked and shared the video. Don't forget to subscribe. You've asked for more content.
Yep, we will absolutely do that. So, those are the jumping mullet. So with that, I have a story. Here it is. It sort of goes with the theme today. You learned it here at AEC 441, the cod and the New World. So, Vikings, Thorwald and his son, Eric the Red, were exiled from Norway for murder. All right, and this was in the year 985 AD. Well, they got a boat and then they set sail on the sea west in the Atlantic Ocean, where they landed at a place that they called Greenland. Now, it just so happens that Greenland still has the same name, and you know, Vikings were pretty interesting in the way they named stuff, because Greenland was not green at all; it was covered with ice. They called it Greenland anyhow. I guess the idea was maybe other people would go out there eventually, and if they called it Iceland, maybe no one wanted to go there. They called it Greenland or White Land, you know, whatever. You'll see that they got some other nicknames they've got for other lands they found later. So Eric's son, Leif Erikson, then sailed on further west to a place that he called Stone Land. All right, I guess there's a lot of stones there, so they called it Stone Land. They weren't really, they were pretty creative like that. This was probably the rocky coast of Labrador in Canada, right? Because that's covered in stones, and if they're going to call it Stone Land, it probably was covered in stones. So Leif Erikson did this. Son of Eric, really grandson of Thorwald. From there, Leif Erikson then headed south to Woodland. Okay, he called this next place Woodland. This was most likely, I'm going to guess, the wooded coast further south, the Canadian provinces of Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, or maybe even as far south as the state of Maine in the United States. So somewhere along there. The remains of a Viking camp have been found in Newfoundland, Canada. And so this is probably maybe where Leif Erikson was at, Newfoundland. So how were the Vikings able to cross this long voyage in the Atlantic back in the year 985? So this is sort of an idea here. It's probably not a coincidence that the range of Atlantic cod leads from Norway to Iceland and then to Greenland and then to Canada. So that's the normal distribution of cod. Vikings had learned to dehydrate codfish by hanging it in cold sea-sprayed air until it dehydrated and lost 4/5 of its water volume and became hardtack. They could then break off pieces of the preserved fish and eat it like jerky, right? It was fish jerky. Now, because they could basically preserve food supply and also make it along the way, that's maybe how they could get over it. So in 1492, Christopher Columbus departed from Spain to the New World with his 3 ships, Santa Maria ex Gallega, the Pinta, and then the Santa Clara, nicknamed the Nina. And Columbus's route then led him south to Cuba, whereas the Vikings had traveled north to Canada. And as a matter of fact, they got to North America hundreds of years before Columbus did. So Columbus is credited as having discovered the New World. However, Viking criminals, murderers, who just so happened to know the distribution of fish and could sail the boats, had found North America about 500 years before Columbus. And they followed the natural distribution of cod, which they could catch and eat along the way. So cod in the New World, the Vikings. Now, cod was a very important fishery in the colonial United States, even in the colonies before the United States, when it was still Britain. The sacred cod hangs in the Boston, Massachusetts State House of Representatives. It's in the chamber. Here it is, the House of Representatives chamber. Here's the cod. This shows the importance of the cod fishery to the welfare of the Commonwealth before it really became the state of Massachusetts. The first sacred cod was lost in 1747 in a fire, and the second cod disappeared during the American Revolution. And the third cod is the one that is seen in the House of Representatives today. So here is the codfish hanging in Boston, Massachusetts State House of Representatives. Here's another one, American Revolution, 1776. The first provincial Congress designed a seal measuring 1.5 inches in diameter, and it depicted an upright fish here and a pine tree on either side of a bundle of 5 arrows. Now the fish and the pine tree represented the main trade of the colony. At the time, this was in New Hampshire. This later then was adopted to become the seal of the state of New Hampshire. So again, going back to the very beginning of the United States and even to the colonies before it, the cod was a very important fish in the history of the United States. So that's some interesting facts there. Family Gattidae of the cod. So there we go. That's all I've got here, and I'm going to stop recording this, and then I will entertain questions.